So I really like Sam and Max. These two are such fun, insane characters. I mean, how could you not love them? So naturally, when I found out that we were getting official Sam and Max figures, I obviously proceeded to not do anything because they were $40 each and I did not have that kind of cash back then. But a while later, I actually ran into them in person at a collectible store near me, which of course prompted me to continue not buying them because this place was asking $50 each and that was way more than I wanted to spend. But then I found just Max at another collectible store even closer to me, which finally prompted me to go about my day and not buy it because they were charging $60 just for Max. And so for about a year, I'd go into that collectible shop and inevitably see him sitting on a shelf, and each time he'd get a little more tempting until I finally figured, okay, this store's usually pretty good about not pricing things too much higher than the aftermarket. So let me just check eBay and see what the listings on there cost, only for me to check eBay and realize there are no listings for Max. There was one for Sam for $2,000, which, side note, I genuinely think that might be a money laundering thing. I don't know. I have no proof of this, but why? Why? He's 40 on Big Bad Toy Store. What are you doing? At this point, I realized this might be my only chance to have this thing, so I bit the bullet, spent the $60, brought him home, started messing with him, and immediately caved and bought Sam too, because it turns out that for some reason, he's just, like, still available at most retailers. No idea why Max is so rare when Sam is so widely accessible, but here we are. Either way, the point is that I'm now the proud owner of Boss Fight Studios, Sam and Max, 01 Max, and 02 Sam. I don't know why they're numbered like that, it makes me uncomfortable. That's the wrong order. But given that that's the order they went with, and Max was the one I got first, I figure we'll start with him. Right out the gate, it's insane how much this thing looks like Steve Purcell's art come to life. Which, to be fair, they've had about 2 decades to refine the translation of these 2D characters into 3D, but that doesn't make this any less impressive. It looks so much like Max, to the point that it goes beyond just looks and really starts to embody the vibe of the character. I love how he's so nearly cartoony, like something out of an old Rubber Hose animation, but then there are those parts that are just a bit too realistic for that style, like the more segmented musculature in the arms, or the more defined elbows, knees, and knuckles. It drags him into this perfectly uncanny valley between lovable cartoon character and something more unsettling. So, you know, Sam and Max. The face sculpt is perfect too. There is nothing behind those eyes, no thoughts, only murder. He's so proud of whatever unhinged thing he just did. It's such a simple expression, but it does so much to bring him to life. And coming into this as a fan of Transformers toys, where most of them have the most generic, neutral facial expression possible, like they're in the world's worst try not to laugh challenge, I really appreciate it here. Paintwork is minimal, but still very solid. Well-defined edges, no patchy areas. It's honestly pretty impressive that they managed to paint the tongue behind those shark teeth, and I love that he's molded in an off-white while his teeth are painted pure white to give them some much-needed separation. They even painted the bottoms of his feet. It really does give the whole thing a much more premium feel. If we include the ears, he's about 4 inches tall, but that probably doesn't mean much without a proper size comparison, so here he is next to Marvel Legends Spider-Man, Netflix Bumblebee, Tahumata, and Earthrise Ironhide, who I might be making a video about soon. Woo! Of course, the figure isn't much use without being able to pose him, so how's the articulation? We have a ball joint at the head, which allows him to look up and down, tilt side to side, and full rotation. Joint at the base of the neck is pretty loose, which isn't great, but that one has less range than the upper joint anyway, so it's not too much of an issue. Rotation at the shoulder, Max's giant football head gets in the way a bit, but otherwise it's not limited at all. Arm moves up that far, there's a bicep swivel, which connects directly to the elbow bend. We have a fairly tight wrist swivel, leg can kick up that far, back quite a bit less, and no outward movement at all. Thigh swivel connected to a knee bend, and that's it. Overall, the articulation's not bad, all the essential stuff is there, but I do feel like it's missing something. For starters, some sort of waist articulation would have been greatly appreciated. A swivel would have been enough, but if they wanted to go for a full ball joint like Sam to allow for an ab crunch, I'd love that too. But the biggest missing feature here is definitely the lack of an ankle joint. The lower legs are just solid slabs of plastic, meaning the feet can't bend or pivot at all, which definitely makes it harder to stay balanced, especially with that massive, dense head of his. That's not even a joke, the head just weighs as much as the rest of the figure. I suppose balance isn't that much of an issue, given that his legs can't really angle outwards at all, but just to be clear, that's not great either. And I just can't figure out why they did it this way. Like, Sam has ankle joints, so they definitely know how to do it, and given how small he is, I struggle to believe it was an issue with part count or plastic usage. I think I heard somewhere that it might have been an issue with breaking the sculpt too much, but like, buddy, it's an action figure. The inherent truth about these things is that articulation is going to inevitably require some kind of compromise in the sculpt, and that's fine. I gladly would have sacrificed a bit of cohesion in the legs for the sake of more posability. Even with that issue, articulation's still okay. You can get him into some cool poses. I just feel like they could have pushed it further, especially given the price point. Fortunately, he can pull off some even better articulation with the whole slew of accessories he comes with. First, we get these two alternate heads, one with a closed grin and the other with no mouth at all. The default head is easy enough to pop off, but putting the other two on is another story entirely. The socket is super tight, and the second joint at the base of the neck means that it keeps moving out of the way while I'm trying to force it on. The mouthless head is especially hard to put on. It takes a lot of force and doesn't actually pop into place at all, instead just sort of sliding on, and it slides off really easily. For some reason, the socket is molded completely differently from the other two. It's mostly just a deep hole, and I kinda wonder if that's the issue. No idea what the deal is, but it's fine. The head's cute, but it's absolutely not one I plan on using much at all. The other smiling head, though, is great. There's something so goofy and charming about it. I wound up getting the most Max vibes from this one, and it's probably my favorite of the three. Interesting choice to have the ears be a separate piece, though. You have to pop them out and swap them over every time you change heads. Honestly, it would be a massive pain to try and pop the heads on with the ears getting in the way, and it'd almost definitely snap off, too. Which is probably why they're removable, so I appreciate it. On top of the accessory holding hands he has by default, he also comes with 3 extra pairs of hands that you can swap between. These open grabby hands, which I really like, a pair of fists, and a right 2-hand and left pointing hand. The hands just pop right out, but it does take a bit of force, which is worrying. You definitely want to be careful to only grab him by the forearm while doing this. That elbow hinge is tiny, and it sure would suck if it broke while you were trying to pull the hand off. And believe me, we don't need any more breakage from these figures. The hands are pretty solid. They're all very expressive and do a good job of expanding how many poses you can get him in. Of course, those accessory holding hands aren't that useful without something to hold, which is where these two weapons come in. First of all, the Luger morph is perfect. There's an insane level of sculpted detail in this thing despite being so small, and of course, Max looks great holding it. Absolutely brings the whole thing together. Also, if you happen to have the TF2 Scout or Engineer figures, first of all, give them to me, but second, this doubles as a bonus accessory for them too, at least I assume. I don't have any of the NECA TF2 figures. I have no idea if this would actually fit in their hands, but I sure hope so.
I will make hat from you, little bunny.
His other weapon is this hammer. Obviously, being a hammer, there's not as much detail in the sculpt work, but what is here is still well done. Max looks solid with it, but it's so close to typical cartoon violence that it almost seems too tame for him. And finally, there are 2 other accessories packed in the box, but they're not really ones for Max to use directly. The first is this rat, which is fine. No articulation, sculpting and paintwork is nice, but honestly, it's a weird inclusion for me that kinda requires me to make a confession. I have not played any of the Sam and Max games. I've read the comics, I've seen the cartoon, but the games are a bit of a blind spot for me. Something if I had a nickel, something every franchise I got into through the comics and cartoons despite the games being their biggest claim to fame, something 2 nickels. There are plenty of rats in the comics, and there's a whole episode about giant rats adapted from the comics and the cartoon, but it seems like this is more of a game reference than anything, making it a bit of a blind spot for me. It's hard to sincerely criticize its inclusion given that I'm definitely missing the reference, but personally I would have given this up for something more specific to Max, like ankle tilts. The other major accessory in the box is the phone. You know, the one that Sam and Max always fight over. Like with the rat, it's at least nice. The sculpt work is good, the paint is good, it looks good in Sam's hand, and I appreciate that the cord is made out of a more flexible material that lets it move around freely. But I also think it kind of embodies the biggest issue with this figure, the price. Because, okay, let's face it, why did they include the phone? This is a massive chunk of plastic, and while the novelty of it being here is neat, it's pretty hard to actually incorporate into the play or display aspects for more than a few seconds. Like, if you're gonna put these two on display, why would you want to pose them fighting over the phone rather than setting them up in cool action poses, guns drawn, and all that jazz? And unless Boss Fight Studios is planning on making a giant office playset at some point, there's kinda nowhere this is supposed to go. It's kind of obvious this was only included because, frankly, Max is small. Like, really small. And mostly just solid off-white plastic without much paint. And limited in articulation. On his own, this thing is absolutely not worth the $40 it retailed for. So they threw the phone in there because it's a huge slab of plastic that fills out the budget, fills out the box, and helps justify the price. It's not just Max you're paying for, you also get these big accessories. The problem is that, to be blunt, I don't really want this. I can't imagine the phone was a super high demand must-have accessory for most folks, and the rat too for that matter. But they wanted to charge 40 bucks, so that's what we got. And to be extremely honest, even with these massive accessories, there's still just not enough here to justify that price point. Let me be clear, this is a very good figure, but it's also very small and very simple. A few bigger accessories doesn't suddenly double the actual value of this set. Obviously, this is all a bit hypocritical coming from me, given that I paid even more for this thing, so I won't dwell on it too long, but I do genuinely have to wonder why they felt the need to price it so high when they surely must have known going into it that Max would have been much harder to make hit that price point. Overall, though, this is still a great toy. I wish there was more articulation, the head thing is a bit annoying and it's priced too high, but even still, I really like this thing. Obviously, some of that is the inherent novelty of there even being an action figure of Max, but it's not like they're entirely baking on the branding either. A lot of love clearly went into bringing this character to life, and despite my gripes, I do think this is a good figure. I just wish they'd been willing to price it lower, because even with the accessories, I just don't think it's worth what they're asking. Fortunately, Sam gets much closer to actually justifying that price point. So, fun fact about this guy. While Max is apparently just impossible to get now, Sam is fully just available at most retailers for retail price. Or at least they were when I recorded this, but no, I had to take so long editing this thing, they're all sold out now, and my point is pointless. Cool, awesome, love that. I'm genuinely not sure why that is, especially because Sam is a much more fully formed figure than Max with a lot more going on. So anyways, I wound up picking him up from Big Bad Toy Store because they tend to be my default for this sort of stuff. I waited for it to be delivered, it arrived like a week or two later, I opened it up, I pulled it out of the box, I started messing with some of the articulation, and... So, that's not great. I can't stress enough, this thing broke on me not even 10 seconds after I got it out of the box. I wasn't even being rough with it, I was absolutely treating it with the delicacy of any other figure. I'm not sure if that peg was just really brittle or if that joint was just too tight, probably both to be honest, but either way, all I know is that as soon as I got this thing, the leg snapped completely off. So obviously I reached back out to BBTS, I explained the situation, I offered to send this copy back in exchange for a new one, and they basically told me, we don't want the broken one, we'll refund you in store credit, feel free to reorder it yourself. So I did. And then, while I was waiting for my reorder to arrive, I started looking at reviews of this thing to see if anyone else had solved a different problem I was having with it. More on that later. And that's when I stumbled upon this review from the Nostalgia Spot, where I learned two very important things. First, this wasn't just a one-off issue, because both legs on his copy broke off too. So it's not just user error, it's a widespread QC problem. Second, apparently, when Boss Fight Studios sent out sample copies to reviewers, they included special letters warning them that the joints might be pretty tight and that they should heat the figures up with a hairdryer or warm water before posing. Now, when I looked into this myself, I was only able to find one review from someone that actually got one of these notes, but frankly, that's kinda worse. Like, yeah, the fact that they're putting the responsibility of fixing their QC issue on us already isn't great, but at the very least, I'd have appreciated some kind of warning, because what this tells me is that, first off, they knew full well that this was an issue, but that second, instead of delaying shipment to try and fix it, or trying to preemptively fix the problem by including a spare set of legs, or even just issuing some sort of public warning on their website, all they seem to have done was send one note to, as far as I can tell, one guy. Maybe I missed another review somewhere that also got one, or maybe you only got one if you ordered a copy from the very first batch directly from Boss Fight Studio themselves. Point being, I've only been able to find one example of them giving any sort of warning that this might be an issue. You know what I found lots of examples of?
Now my problem with this figure, right out of the package, as I was articulating him, getting him ready to review, his leg snapped off. It was a clean snap. I didn't give it a lot of force, I was just trying to bend it like it did the rest of the joints, and it just snapped. So, that's pretty disappointing. I'm sad about that.
Let's see if you can bend. The knee does not seem to want to bend very much, though, unfortunately. Wow. That kneecap is very resistant, so that's... okay.
First off, my first copy of Sam broke at the knee when I first got it out of the package. Luckily, I was able to resolve that, get them returned, and get a replacement from the online vendor that I used. Tight joints do worry me. I'm scared that he'll break again. His knees are single jointed.
I'm not moving those knees again.
No, they're very tight.
Okay, so there's his articulation there. Oop, yeah, I see what they mean. They're a little bit tight. So they may require getting warmed up or boiled.
Nice cartoonish poses that they're famous for, so you could probably get them in nice poses. Oh, I think I broke it that fast. Ah, ain't that something? Unreal.
Now this knee broke the first time I tried to bend it. I found the joints were pretty tight. It just broke right off at the peg, when the peg moved into the thigh. So that's the joint here that snapped, but it's unfortunate that happened. I don't know why these joints have to be so tight. I have the same complaints with Hasbro stuff though. These rubber figures that Hasbro makes, these ones are at least a bit more solid, but I just don't know why those ratchets have to be so tight for a small figure like this.
Look, here's the thing. While looking for any acknowledgement of this issue from Boss Fight Studio, I wound up hearing a lot from the team that worked on these figures, and it's so clear that this was a passion project for them. Andrew, one of the lead designers, talks a lot about how much he loves these characters and how exciting it's been getting to work directly with Steve Purcell on this. I don't think this was a case of them putting their profits or their public image before the quality of their product, at least not intentionally. But their failure to address this extremely massive problem is still wildly irresponsible at best. It's really hard to trust a company that can't prevent or even just acknowledge these sorts of issues, especially when they're asking consumers to pay premium prices for their products. Frankly, if I had found this review before I had reordered my second copy of Sam, I probably wouldn't have bothered. And to be blunt, it's hard to recommend these toys in good conscience because of this. Which sucks, because aside from this one glaring issue, this is such a good figure. When I got my second copy, I was careful with it right out of the box. I took it straight over to a hairdryer, heated it up for a solid 15-20 seconds, and then tried to flex the knee. And worryingly, the exact same joint was super stuck on the exact same leg. So I spent a bit more time heating it up and then very carefully bent the knee until it came free. So far, my second copy hasn't had any breakage, but that knee joint is still pretty tight and I get nervous every time I pose it. Fortunately though, not having to contend with a broken leg meant I could actually take in and appreciate the positive things about this toy. The sculpt work here is incredible. Obviously, Max's design meant that the sculpt itself was a lot more simple, but Sam's larger size and baggy clothes means that the designers got to show off what they're capable of, and it looks fantastic. The proportions are great, perfectly cartoony, and pretty darn dynamic. Like with Max, the sculpting here does an excellent job of towing the line between uncanny, realistic detail and cartoony simplicity. I love all the little folds and wrinkles in the clothes. They feel so natural and believable regardless of what pose he's in, and it's genuinely impressive how much detail they put into areas that you're not even gonna see, like his belt or the buttons on his shirt. That face sculpt is really amazing too. It looks a lot like Sam, though the actual expression is maybe a little less, well, expressive than Max's. It's not bad, and it's not like he's never made this exact face before, but something a bit more explicitly happy would have been nice. The colors here are basically perfect. The medium nougat they used for the fur is spot on, and the dark azure on the tie looks just right. The suit is an interesting case because its color kinda depends on any given iteration of the character. Sometimes it's pure gray, other times it's much more blue, but I think this lighter, less saturated blue-gray was the right way to go. It's a nice compromise between designs and does a good job of not overpowering the color palette without being completely lifeless. The guy's quite a bit bigger than Max too, standing at about 6 inches tall with his hat. For another size comparison, here he is next to SS86 Optimus Prime, Marvel Legends Spider-Man 2099, Max, and here they both are next to another freelance peacekeeper, Death's Head. The jacket and tie are separate pieces made out of this much more rubbery material, which is great because it means that it's a whole lot easier going ham on the poses. Like Max, he has a double ball joint at the head, which allows for a decent up and down as well as tilt, but the rotation is a bit limited thanks to the collar getting in the way and forcing his head clean off if you push it too far. Full rotation at the shoulder, arm moves out that far and is designed to tuck under the jacket for some extra range, which is super clever. Bicep swivel, elbow bend, wrist swivel, and oh hey look, a ball joint at the waist. It allows for a full rotation as well as a pretty good range of side to side movement and a solid forward and back crunch. Leg can kick up, back, and out that far, thigh swivel, oh god please please please, okay nice, bend to the knee, the foot can swivel, bend up and down, and there's an ankle pivot. Look, obviously it's not the most insane level of articulation ever, but it's still leagues above Max. The waist joint and ankle tilt alone do so much to get him in way more dynamic poses, and unlike Max, his legs can actually move outwards by more than 1 degree, which shouldn't be as big a surprise as it is, but hey, I'll still take it. Of course, those poses are made even better with all the accessories he comes with. Starting off, let's talk about the hat. It comes off, revealing some extra sculpted hair on top of the head, which I adore. I appreciate being able to take it off. It adds to the number of ways to customize the look and pose him around, but the major caveat here is that it will not stay on his head for anything. This is actually the issue I was looking for when I stumbled on that Nostalgia Spot review, because I wanted to see if anyone had found a way to keep keep it on his head more securely. No luck on that front, I'm afraid. I wound up just using a bit of handy tack on the inside to keep it in place, but I wish they'd added like a tab on the side or a peg on the top or something that would give it a bit more grip. He also comes with 2 alternate heads, same as Max. And same as Max, they're both really hard to pop on. I think it's a combination of the sockets being too tight and the ball jointed neck moving out of the way every time you try to put it on. Not great, but once you've got them on there, they do look pretty good. First up is this angry head, which is fantastic. So much more emotion than his default head, even if it is obviously a bit more situational. The third head is probably my least favorite. It's not bad, but it's just kinda ooh. I guess from some angles it looks mouthless, so if you wanted to display Sam and Max together like that, you probably could, but I can't see myself using it much at all. By default, he comes packaged with a pair of grabby hands, but he also comes with these very well sculpted fists and these open hands. I love that the open hands are more relaxed than Max's. It's a small detail, but it really does help to characterize both of them. These hands are pretty difficult to pull out and even harder to push in. Normally that wouldn't be the end of the world, but after the leg incident, I'm a lot more on edge about this stuff. Like the knee, it's just held on by this peg, and even though it seems to be a much more flexible material, I can absolutely still see this breaking if I'm not careful. I guess that's the upside about having a second copy of the figure I can just steal accessories from though. Thanks, BBTS. He does also come with one extra, well, I guess hand isn't the right word, but he does come with this genuinely super cool paper bag Max puppet. Look, I know I was just complaining about the rat and telephone being niche, unnecessary chunks of plastic ballooning the price, but I don't know, this one's working for me. Maybe it's just the fact that it's from the comics and cartoons, so I get the reference more. Maybe it's the fact that it attaches directly to the figure itself, so it feels more relevant. Whatever the reason, I'm fully okay with this one and love it a lot. Fair warning though, the peg in the bag is apparently much tighter than the peg in the elbow, which apparently makes it harder than I'd like to pull off. This is easily fixable, you just have to pop it back in place, but man, this thing is already on such thin ice that it freaks me out a bit. Of course, circling back to those grabby hands, they're not much use on their own, so they included a few things he can actually grab onto. First up is this popsicle, which is a great addition to the set. Sam's love of frozen treats transcends incarnation, so it's nice that they snuck this one in here. I love the sculpted and melty bits, and the paintwork is incredibly solid. But obviously the main accessory of the set is his pistol, the Big Kill. I love how this thing looks. The detailing is excellent, the cartoony bend in the barrel is both charming and comic accurate, and I adore just how hilariously oversized it is. Like, it's accurate, but dude, this thing is almost as big as Max. And like with the Luger morph, if you happen to have a Spy TF2 figure lying around, this can double as his secondary.
You cut me up, little buddy.
And that's it for accessories. On the whole, I do think Sam is a much better value than Max, with much more involved sculpting and paintwork, his much larger size, better articulation, and accessories that all feel much more justified. He's easily more worth the money than Max was. Now, is he worth $40? Well, I don't know. Marvel Legends Death's Head, the figure I reviewed in my last video, is significantly taller than Sam, has way more articulation, comes with almost as many accessories, and it's based on one of my all-time favorite comic characters, someone I spent years begging Hasbro to make a figure for, and I still wound up questioning if that was worth 40 bucks. And if I was on the fence about that, even with my judgment clouded by the sheer joy of even having a Death's Head figure, then honestly, I can't say that Sam is quite worth the price. I don't know, obviously Boss Fight Studios is a much smaller company and the production runs are much more limited, meaning costs are almost definitely higher, so it's not necessarily fair or reasonable to compare, but I just struggle to believe that either of these two is actually worth what they're asking for. Maybe like 30, 35 would have been more sensible, or heck, drop the rat in the phone, sell the two as a single set for like 60. I honestly think that would have solved a lot of the issues I had with the pricing. Of course, even then, the glaring issue here is still the abysmal handling of the QC issues. The alternate heads and hands on both of these guys are worryingly hard to pop on and off, with a genuine concern about breakage, and even that's ignoring the fact that there was breakage. The leg thing being such a widespread issue is a massive disappointment, and the fact that the best I've seen them do is send out a small handful of notes telling consumers it was their responsibility to heat it up, leaving everyone that didn't get one of those notes high and dry, really rubs me the wrong way. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. I want to unconditionally love these toys, to recommend them to any Sam & Max fan, but this is supposed to be an honest review, and as such, I cannot in good conscience recommend these figures to anyone. There's absolutely no way of knowing whether you might just break it right out of the box, and Boss Fight's lack of open communication makes it hard to trust that they'll make amends or fix it in the future. future. To their credit, the Nostalgia Spot review did mention that when he emailed them directly, they did send him an extra copy of legs, but they aren't going to have an infinite supply of those. That's a very short-term solution. And some places actually have Sam on pre-order right now, which makes me think they might be doing another production run, but without knowing if they even bothered to fix the QC issues, I absolutely wouldn't risk picking it up. And to make matters worse, now Boss Fight is doing Hellboy and Garfield, meaning that they have a much bigger audience, and if they don't get their QC in check, they're going to be affecting a whole lot more people. It's such a shame, because the sheer idea that they even made Sam and Max figures should be enough on its own for me to enthusiastically shill these to anyone that's even heard of these two. And on paper, these figures are so well designed, but it's all being held back by the amount of money they're asking you to spend and the lack of quality control they're able to enforce. The sad truth is that, realistically, these are probably the only action figures we're ever going to get of Sam and Max. And I know that because of that, it's absolutely going to be worth the risk for some people. I don't want to dissuade you from supporting the series you love, especially when they get so little merchandise anyways. But I would ask you to be absolutely certain that you know what you're getting into ahead of time. In the end, having these two now, knowing that I've already spent the money and having taken care of the broken leg, it's easy for me to appreciate these toys for what they are, because the actual design of them, for all the pricing and QC issues, is genuinely wonderful. But even still, it's hard to fully enjoy them knowing what it took to get here. Just be sure you make an informed decision, will ya? And to Boss Fight Studio, I want to say this. There are clearly a lot of talented and passionate people working on these toys. I want you guys to succeed, but this sort of stuff is hard to overlook and makes it even harder to trust whatever you've got coming next. However, I'll be more than willing to do just that, and all you have to do to win me back over is put the Geek and Max Salmon in Wave 3. ABC ya!